TitleMatchNetwork.com.
Do you remember when Owen first came to you and wanted to be a wrestler? Did you encourage him, or did you?
Yeah, big time.
Okay.
He never really came to me. When Owen came to me was I was with the Hart Foundation. We were starting to, probably still in the blue tights.
Right.
We were starting to go a little somewhere, starting to have a little fun. I was making, from by my dad's standards here, I was making some pretty good money. And I remember, I did have this feeling that it would run out any minute.
Right.
I always had that feeling. But I remember telling Owen, it's like, I don't know how long this is going to last, but if I was you, get out of the school, whatever it is you're doing, you can always go back and do it, because we got maybe 8, 9, 10 months. You could always join me in gym.
Right.
And get in on this thing while you can. And I remember Owen actually considering it quite strongly. I remember Martha kind of mocked him for it. Yeah, right, Owen, be a wrestler. It was kind of she didn't take it serious at all. And a week later or 2 weeks later, he was working Stampede Wrestling for my dad's, which had reopened right around the same time. And I think it was a good move for him, and I think he was always glad he did it. As a matter of fact, I know he was. I know they both were. I think wrestling turned out to be, for both of us, I think, did a lot of things for us and opened up a lot of doors for us. And, despite whatever has happened in the business,
right.
I think we've always been really grateful for what it brought, what the business gave us anyway.
Right. I guess in 1984, your father sold Stampede over to Vince, and part of the deal was, I guess, you, your brother, and Dynamite went over to World Wrestling Federation. What were some of your initial impressions when you first got over there, as far as initial impressions of Vince?
Well, it was an unconditional part of the deal. It was never like, it was never like in the fine print or anything like that. We were invited along as like, pat on the back kind of stuff, but there was no promises or guarantees on anything. Dynamite, as a matter of fact, we showed up and did TVs, Dynamite and me. We did Brantford, Poughkeepsie TVs or something,
right.
Hamilton, I think is what it was. And they paid us $75 and $50. He quit. He wouldn't even talk to him for 4 or 5. He said, the hell with them.
Right.
And, of course, I was limited. I didn't have Japan. I didn't have a lot as much. I had it, but not real secure anyway. And I had knee surgery. So I hung on and kind of checked, wrote it out. And they did tell me, like, oh, that's just TV. Don't worry. It's not going to, But, you really think about it, paying somebody $50 for TV is not much, especially when you looked at both Dynamite and me. We spent more than that on just our expenses in hotel and food, like triple that, and we were budgeted. And like I said, we didn't make a lot of money in those days. So Dynamite was rightly offended. I went to Japan. I did my last trip to Japan, hoping that I had some kind of security there, and went into the WWF almost the day I landed from Japan. Not sure what could happen. Right. Not expecting much. If anything, a lot of the guys that I was with in Japan kind of reasoned with me that, because George Scott, who was Vince's guy in those days, had told me, "Don't worry, we got big plans for you. And, all you guys." They were still kind of talking about Neidhart, Owen, Davey, and myself. My brother Bruce was supposed to move into the management. I don't know what happened there with him, but all I know is I ended up there all by myself when I watched the New York guys, as they were called in those days.
Right.
We used to laugh a little bit about it because they were famous in the Stampede territory. It was like I remember Dick Murdoch when we were over in Japan or Arabia or whatever and stuff like that. He always talked about working New York style. He'd stand on their apron and stomp his feet and stuff like that.
Right.
He wouldn't do that. Was considered New York style. So a lot of people made jest of New York style. But
one of my questions was actually, were a lot of guys intimidated by you guys when you guys came in, as far as your athletic ability compared to the work rate that they?
Not with me. I was such a small. When I came in, I was doing jobs for Vinny Goulet and stuff like that.
Right.
Gonna get this big push. But I did get my first check, and I think I made like a couple grand anyway, American. And it was a big change from what I was making working for my dad. So it does revert back to that little fish, big pond, and big fish, big little pond kind of mentality. I figured I'd have to just suffer through it. Then as I watched everyone work, I thought I can, I'm just going to dig in here, just keep, and I often, you talked about my first meeting with Vince. was in Hamilton. Same time me and Dynamite had tagged. He stressed to me that he wanted his boys to work out. He wanted all of us to work out. Of course, I could barely walk in the ring. I had just had knee surgery. That was before I went to Japan when we actually had that match. And I kind of had a really bad audition first time.
Right.
And I didn't do well, and I'd been off, and I didn't expect to do well. It was kind of like hoping that I wouldn't even have to wrestle. That was kind of like the last look they ever gave me for a long time. They made their judgment, passed their judgment on me that I was not a good worker and not worth spending a lot of time or effort on. And they loved Dynamite, which he was working really good then. And they hadn't even seen Davey, but they knew enough about the two of them. But they were going to Japan, so they were kind of out of the equation. So I ended up there all by myself. And after I did go to Japan, I started for him. And I got to know Cowboy Bob Orton, who did a lot for me in those days. Brian Blair, some of those guys.
Right.
And I just kind of did the circuit, you know. They didn't have any big push or anything like that. And, I, of course, thought it was all going to run out of gas. And especially WrestleMania 1, they were talking about if it wasn't a success, they'd lose everything. And then it turned out it was a big success,
right.
And right around that time is when Neidhart had actually come in February. That was in that time when they were going to call me Cowboy Bret Hart.
Right,
I told you that story, but George Scott came up and had me come up to his room. He said, "I've got a hell of a gimmick for you, Cowboy Bret Hart, like the Electric Horseman, a horse that lights up and white hat with light bulbs on it or something." And he got me all excited. They're gonna have an action figure and the horse, and this is gonna be able to have a different horse in every building. I remember I left. I was trying to get excited about it, and I remember knocking on his door about 2 a.m. I said, "Josh, I don't want to be a cowboy." I said, this was in light of where Kirshner was going. Right. He was in, and he was becoming a big name and had the new toy and all that shit. And I think it was a pretty gutsy call at that time. And I said, I don't want to be a cowboy. I can't ride a horse. I hate cowboy boots. I hate country music. I can't do it.
Right.
I could never make it right, especially where I come from here. They got too many real cowboys here. And I remember he told me, he says, "This is a hell of a thing. You're going to miss it. We'll give it to somebody else." I said, "We have to give it to somebody else."
Right.
And I did run by the idea of tagging me up with Neidhart, Collins Hart Foundation. He's managed by Jimmy Hart. And this before I'd ever spoke to Jim about it. And he told me, he says, "You could never work heel. You could never be a heel. You don't have the face. You don't have it." And so I went through my downward spiral until I actually was getting ready to quit. It was about maybe 2 weeks before WrestleMania.
Right.
And they just kept leaving me off TV. And I called up to basically give my notice. Because I was, not that I was going to quit and go home kind of thing. I think I was going to try to regroup and come back at another time and just keep digging in somewhere else.
Right.
I didn't want to blow the big opportunity in New York. And I thought I'd leave with some kind of reputation and come back later. And that's when he said, "He goes, we're going to turn you heel with Neidhart." And so right after WrestleMania 1, I just walked out and I was started as a heel. And that was my breakthrough to a certain degree. And I think I patterned a lot of my character traits off Dynamite, I think, a little bit.
Right. He
was not using them. He had no intentions of going there. And I finally took me out of that passenger seat thing where I didn't have to go along with what Goulet wanted to do, and the spoiler and all these guys that were such shitty workers or didn't want to do shit with me anyway. I remember Rene Goulet wouldn't even take a drop kick from me. They just wouldn't do anything for you. So Tiger Chun-Li. Every night I'd come back and Terry Gibbs having me in a bear hug like this.
I was actually at some of the Spectrum shows with you before.
I liked all those guys, but
right.
I just wasn't. They want to have a nice, easy match with a nice. They didn't want to do anything for me,
right.
And I couldn't get any emotion going. They couldn't get any heat up on me. And so when they turned me heel, actually, I remember the last time I worked with Terry Gibbs, he came back and threw his boots against the wall. Said something about I'd never learned to work. Said it in front of Neidhart without Neidhart knowing we were related. And I thought, I'm going to show these guys what it's like. If I was a heel, if I could work with me.
Right.
And that was the whole thing for me. I became a really good heel right off the bat. I worked really hard, and I got a lot of heat up on my. I really enjoyed those matches that we had with the Bulldogs.